We are live. We are live. What is going on, everyone? Tonight's going to be a fun one. How are you guys doing?
I'm
Alex,
gauging the fun. I'm gauging the funness here already. That was not very enthusiastic of an intro, so I'm gauging the funness already.
I know. I had to
it's
tone
like,
it down.
hey guys, this is gonna be fun today. Like, what was that?
It's gonna be miserable. No, I had to tone it.
It's gonna suck.
Oh goodness, I got two others. Sorry, I had two other screens going because I like to respond over to the comments, and it started playing in my ear and driving me crazy. But no, I had to save my excitement level for it and do like the podcast intro.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
No, but for those of you guys that don't know, obviously Alex Rudd is here. He's nothing special. But then we have Brennan Chapman. And Brennan, kind of introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll do like a full intro to the podcast and have you like redo it. But
yeah, 10-4. Okay, so my name is Brennan Chapman, as Ben said. I'm the product manager at Do It Molds, which is a custom tackle company. Our bread and butter is molds, obviously, made right here in Iowa. Basically, our bread and butter product, though, is molds that we manufacture to allow folks like yourselves, dedicated fishermen and fisherwomen, to make custom tackle from all the way from soft baits to lead. So that's who I am and what I do.
Awesome. Well, cool. So kind of the direction of tonight's podcast is going to be talking, obviously, do-it stuff, custom baits, the explosion of homemade lures as kind of the COV hit us, and then talk about maybe some of the trends in bass fishing as it relates to custom stuff, but also just in general, right? Just talk about trends in bass fishing, maybe hot new products or new things that are coming out. So we're going to do a little introduction for the podcast, nothing too crazy, and then we'll actually dive into the full conversation. So here we go. What is going on, everyone? This is Benjamin Nowak, and welcome to another episode of Bass and Bourbon. I think this is episode number 4, and tonight we are having actually a mixed drink with some Old Forester 100. And Old Forester is a great drink, but I mixed it with some Burners to make it a little bit more northern. And yeah, that's what we're drinking tonight. But what is going on? We are joined with Brennan Chapman from Do It Molds and Mr. Beard, Alex Rudd. So Brennan, kind of give us a quick rundown on your position with Do It and kind of you as a tackle head, because like as people can see, you have a ton of tackle behind you too.
Yeah, so I'm the product manager at Do It, and one of the roles, my favorite role that it entails is like new product development. So one of my, one of the key things that I have to do for my position is just be able to keep an eye on trends and really monitor what's going on within the industry, which isn't really a job. That's more like a hobby to me because, yeah, I have a lot of tackle and I love collecting it. I love looking at it. I love tinkering with it. I like fishing it. So yeah, that's one of the things that I do is really keep an eye on some trends within the industry and kind of know what to start development on and maybe work ahead on. And then, I don't know, select 7 to 10 new products, primarily molds that we need to jump on and start working on.
And that's one of the cool things, like, especially over the past handful of years, I would say probably like 4 or 5 years, you've seen Do It go from just a company that makes fairly traditional molds, like ball head stuff and like a walleye jig head, to actually like custom specialized like bass tackle. And I don't know if you want to kind of talk through the process of that, but like you've seen Do It really evolve as more than just like a generic, homemade lead stuff to like really specialized product.
Yeah, I think you could look back at our product line overall and honestly kind of see a timeline of fishing and our progress as anglers and innovators grow over time. So like you could look at a timeline and look at like, okay, there's a ball head with a 90-degree hook. And then a couple of years later, like we start working towards what we consider like our modern jig. There's an archy head, there's a sparky head, there's a flipping jig, a brush jig, kind of all in there as that evolves. And then now we're seeing a trend, really more towards downsizing stuff, more towards finesse, which is probably this last 5 years has been really particularly oriented at that finesse market and maybe a hint of Japanese in there too.
like that's what I think is so crazy too, is because as you start to look at kind of what's coming to market, you see like new techniques which utilize like old baits and old products, but like new ways to fish them or new ways to use them, and sort of a reversion back to the finesse market, right? Like you said. But that's one thing that Alex just got into too, is like Ned rig fishing, which Ned rig fishing really isn't anything nuts, right? It's basically a worm nose jig mold with, you know, a small piece of soft plastic on the back that we just started kind of modifying to be a little bit more finesse. So like Do It came out with the weedless mold, but like where is that market for you guys? You've had to blow up with that stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the finesse market in general has been, I feel like we've done a really nice job in that market. We've kicked out a lot of like nice northern tier, smallmouth, walleye oriented stuff, but there's a huge overlap between that and the largemouth or spotted bass, smallmouth, whatever, finesse market. So there's a nice overlap there. I feel like we've covered that pretty well over the years, and we're going to continue to do so with more finesse products, but then also not forgetting about, you know, the power fishing stuff, some of the bigger techniques that are still out there, because while there is still a ton of forward movement that we're going to see in finesse, and I think you're going to see, like I mentioned, some JDM Japanese oriented looking stuff. The power fishing stuff's never going to go away. There's always going to be people that prefer to fish larger baits whenever they can and slow it down and offer a big presence in the water with a, you know, finesse cadence, I guess you could say. So
Well, Alex and I were joking today. Who was it, Alex? You sent me a text like, who's fishing the drop shot with 17-pound test?
Oh yeah, Jared Littner, and he was like he was flipping a drop shot on 17-pound test with a 3/2X flipping hook, and
yeah.
I texted Ben and I was like, I can get behind that kind of drop shot right there. Like that's my kind of drop shot.
Yeah, dude.
But no, seriously, I mean that right there for me, like that. I feel like that's where, okay, so I took the Ned rig and I turned it into something like that is more, I fish a Ned rig very hard. Like a lot of people drag it and, oh, you know, whatever. Not me, man. I'm like, I'll take it thing and I'll like crack it off the bottom and I'm, you know, fishing in current. I'm fishing 3/16-ounce heads, you know, really bright, vibrant colors. Well, I think like the drop shot thing could be something similar for me. Like, seeing him flip a drop shot on 17-pound test with a 3/8-ounce drop shot weight, I kind of like sparks at my brain. I was like, oh my God, I could crush some fish. Like I know specific like places where I bet I could take that and go crush some fish. So your boy's probably going to be rigging him up I don't know what you would call it, power shotting. I don't know. I'm going to rig it up and probably go crush some with it, but yes.
What did you grab, Brennan? I think I know what you grabbed.
Well, we're just like talking about power shotting or offering a drop shot in a unconventional drop shot situation, like you were mentioning Jared Lintner. Yeah, that's something that I think a lot of people have kept quiet here these last couple of years. And I think you're going to start to see that, you know, kind of surge in popularity and become more mainstream too. And that's offering a drop shot presentation in somewhere that you probably shouldn't put a drop shot, but you know, you rig it on something like that. Like that's a pretty stout but sharp little 1/0 EWG. You rig a drop shot, worm, whatever, little swim bait, but somewhere where they're not using it, they go nuts for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, a lot of the fish I deal with in a lot of situations, like these assholes, they're assholes is what they are. They're little green swimming assholes. Is like they want something in their face and you have to suspend it in their face to get them to eat it. Like if it touches the bottom, they're done. If it's on top, they don't commit to it. They want it right smack in their face. And so that's what I'm thinking is just like a short, exactly what Littner was throwing, which was probably like a 8-inch leader. And they had that big worm on there and just flipping that thing, man. I can think of so many situations where that thing would probably get absolutely cracked. And then I can still hit them hard like I like to hit them with 17-pound test and get them into the boat. But I'm definitely going to start experimenting with stuff like that. It's just, it interests me. Everything like that stuff, anything to look different, man. That's the thing. And, you know, these poor fish around here, they get abused. And so they see the same 12 things over and over and over and over again. And so like this past year, Max Scent played huge for me because of that scent technology. I know that was a huge player. And then like the Ned rig played huge for me because I was going and fishing a Ned rig in situations where nobody else was fishing a Ned rig and catching them. And so I don't know. And then do anything would do it, like those Ned rigs I made. That bright purple, stupid color. It's stupid looking, but dude, I'm telling you, that's the kind of stuff around here you gotta have to get bites. So
like they came out with the Tokyo rig, and I know Do It came out with like a Tokyo mold for the lead.
Mhm.
Did you guys see that sell a lot? Like the Tokyo rig, I think was here, and then like maybe it's still happening, and we just don't know about it. But like I've never had a ton of success with it.
Yeah, I think the Tokyo rig. I think there's always going to be people that are going to remain partial to it because they got on a wicked hot bite a couple times and like they love it now and will always use it. And that's fine. I totally get it. I think the Tokyo rig, maybe there's too many other techniques that are easier to fish that are so damn close to the same presentation that it kind of counters the need for it. That's just my opinion, but I would agree that it was kind of here and gone. You heard a lot about it, and then it kind of fizzled up pretty quick.
What about like an A rig? Like, what's the evolution of an A rig? Because you guys had right at one time a mold for it.
Yep, and we still do. I do know the wire forms that you need to put inside the mold to pour your A rig successfully is out of stock. They've had a hard time keeping that one in stock lately. I could see a ton of innovation around an A rig. I think finding a way to hide the hardware and components over time is going to be big. I think finding ways to maybe move your swim baits a little differently on your A rig is going to be big. I think maybe you've already seen it a little bit. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it because people will get pissed, but like a scrounger style head on an A rig, a bunch of little scroungers.
That's sneaky.
Mm-hmm.
I knew a guy who was making them. He made a chatterbait headed Alabama rig, and that was the most interesting thing. He just put a chatterbait blade on the front of the Alabama rig, and like made them just for a little while, and then he just like disappeared. I don't know where the guy went, but I remember a bunch of people around here bought them, and they caught fish, and then it was just like he just went away, and nobody ever made them again. But man, that thing, I mean, like you start reeling it. Yeah, I know, right?
He knew too much.
Yeah. What was crazy though is like it was like it would vibrate and like the whole thing would shiver. Like it's not just you would think, oh, just the blade would get going, but like it would get going and you would reel it and the whole rig would just like vibrate through the water. It was so weird. But yeah, it was something different. I think you're right though. I think the development of A rigs moving forward is going to be playing with materials and stuff like that, you know, and really figuring out just a different way to make it. But all at the same time, I just don't know how long it lasts. You know what I mean? Like you'll see a peak and then just like everything else, it'll be like whoop, and then just crash back off again. I think it's just trends. It's just like trends in anything else. Trends in baits are just like trends on the internet. They come and they go. They come as fast as they go. And
the biggest thing with that is that Bass and FLW and all these other programs won't let you use it at the highest tier, right? So we'll ever get the amount of promotion maybe that other techniques would get until someone wins on a punch shot. Like someone will end up winning on a punch shot, and like that thing will just go through the roof more so than it did. But until that happens, I just don't like. It's just going to be another technique that guys are using. The same thing with the Nico rig. I mean, the Nico rig blew up when Brett Height almost won with it on Kentucky Lake or something. So
look at like a 7 to 10 inch ribbon tail worm. It never stopped working. Nobody talks about it anymore. It's not cool. Yeah. It's not trendy. It's not sexy anymore. Same thing with a spinnerbait. Now everybody wants to talk and read and see about the chatterbait, and all of a sudden the chatterbait's taking its place. While you know, a lot of people still know that a 7 to 10 inch worm and a spinnerbait are two of some of the most productive baits ever that will ever exist. Period. But it's not trendy.
Do you make your own spinnerbaits?
I do sometimes. I will say that's one category that I typically go straight retail. I honestly, this last couple of years, I've really started to use that Covert series, Jason Kirsty spinnerbait. Dude,
I forgot
lit them up on that. Yeah, that's my new go-to. I still fish like old Stanley spinnerbaits. I've got some Hildebrandt stuff, but no, I got to tell you that new Covert series spinnerbait really filled my need to make any. But I do sometimes like to go down to like the smallest size wire, and then upsize my blades. Like there are some situations where I'll just throw one together real quick, because it's not that hard. It's really not. But
it's so sneaky too. There's so much you can do with the spinnerbait. Like guys in California make like Z-wire blades or Z-wire arms on it, and like there's so many sneaky things you can do with it. It's a bait that I just don't have a lot of confidence in. It's just not something I throw a lot. But,
yeah, no, and there's a lot to dissect there with a spinnerbait, I think. You know, Jason Christie's the guy to talk to for that. Definitely not me, but
yeah.
But no, I mean, just understanding blade combinations and creating drag and vibration in the water with, you know, changing your blades. Like once you can kind of unlock some of that stuff, and I by no means have it unlocked fully, but just kind of understanding some of that stuff.
What's fascinating to me is how regional certain things are. Like when I went to Oklahoma, dude, like spinnerbait mecca of the world. Like everybody throws a spinnerbait. Like every lake that me and Edwin went to threw a spinnerbait. Jimmy threw a spinnerbait. Well, I mean, Jimmy, you know, Jimmy throws a spinnerbait all the time. But like, dude, it was just, but it was like so wild because like I just asked Edwin, I was like, what's the deal with the spinnerbait? Like why but that's the way East Tennessee is with crankbaits, flat sides, square bills. Like I'm a cranker. That's what we do in East Tennessee. It's so weird to see such regional baits, but like a spinnerbait is one of those. And dude, you're right about a spinnerbait as far as like the versatility of it. And like I knew an old guy once that he would throw a spinnerbait. He did the same. It didn't matter how they were eating it or what he was doing. He would throw it in there. He'd let it sink all the way to the bottom. And he'd drag it like 2 or 3 times like a jig and then start reeling it. And dude, I can't tell you how many times that old boy, and my dad does that too. He'll flip into somewhere and let it fall and pick it up off the bottom and drag it like a jig. And how many times that dad's gone, there's one, and caught a spinnerbait fish like that. You know what I mean? Like dad's a nickels guy. Like he always threw nickels. You know, that was what I always, yeah, there you go. Pulsator, dude. Pulsator is the deal. And I mean, like, man, it's crazy. Like spinnerbaits, it's hilarious, dude. Spinnerbaits it's like a jig. There's so many and they're all so similar, but there's certain ones that are special. And I don't know what makes them special, but there's something special about them.
Yeah, dude. And like the difference between long arm and short arm spinnerbaits, like different gauge wires. Like as much as I love a pulsator, like it's actually hard to get that bait to flex because the wire is pretty stiff, right? It's a pretty stiff wire on the pulsator, but it's so good. Like you can fish it so fast without that thing burning out, and it doesn't want to turn on you. But when they bite it, like they bite it and they get it. It's just hard to get the bait to do a lot more than just.
Yeah, it's a crazy versatile tool. I mean, I'll take a 1/2 ounce, 3/8 or 1/2 ounce up to 3/4 sometimes, throw it in 6 inches of water and burn it back. And I'll use that same spinnerbait in 15, 20 foot of water, slow rolling it over brush piles. And then, you know, you go to like an ounce, ounce and a half, and I use it on mainstream, you know, island heads and islands on the Mississippi River, flipping and current, you know, go up to a lay down and flip an 1.5 ounce spinnerbait in there. It has more drawing power than a jig, and it's, you know, the same presence in the water.
That's so cool.
Yep. Y'all ever burn a spinnerbait? Like boil it and burn it? Oh my God. That's something, I've not done it in a while, but like you can go some of these highland reservoirs when it starts to warm up and like go these giant boulders, right? Like, you know, all these like Norris and Cherokee Douglas, especially Cherokee, has these ginormous boulders. And those smallmouth will just like get down in those cracks, and you can take a spinnerbait and throw it up there. And I mean, just reel it as hard as you, and it'd be like skipping out of the water and like barely be in the water, dude. And those smallmouth will come out of those rocks and just annihilate that thing, dude. It's so much fun.
Do you think it'll still happen though? Like, do you think that bite will still happen with as much pressure as there is?
Dude, you know, that's something we go back and forth all the time about it. I think Cherokee is a special instance of pressure because Cherokee is not that big of a lake. I mean, it's big, but it fishes very small. And so I think bites like that, they come and go. You know what I mean? It's like if you can get out there on a Wednesday, when, you know, a Wednesday in the middle of the week, then yeah, probably you can get them to do it. But like to go out there on a Saturday when they're having a 150 boat, you know, team trail, or like when the FLW comes or whatever they're calling themselves now, and like, because they got a MLF FLW event or whatever it's called. They've got like 2 college events. They've got a high school event. They've got an open. I mean, like, and that's just like, it's 150 boats, 200 boats, 200. And that's just, I think the pressure gets to them because we've talked about it 4 years ago, 5 years ago. You go up there with a pulsator, a white pulsator, didn't matter what. I mean, just as long as it was a white anything, really. But like a white pulsator, you catch 22, 23 pounds of smallmouth like it's no problem. Now you go up there the same time of year and put that pulsator in your hand, you might get 4 bites all day long. And so I think it's pressure. I mean, it definitely is the pressure, but I think they'll still do it. I think that it's just going to have to be one of those things you go out there, like I say, on a Wednesday, like in the middle of the week when there's nobody there and the fish are acting right.
It's interesting, too, that we talked about crankbaits, right, Alex? You brought crankbaits up. Brennan pulled out some crankbaits when he was up here with me that were like flat side deep divers, Cliff Pace, like black labels. And there's such, that one right there. But, like, there's so many
black label.
Oh, that's, what's his name's crankbaits, ain't it?
Pace.
Yeah.
But like, there's so many nuances to crankbaits out there, and like, you're seeing this huge push to balsa or huge push to like new materials and crankbaits. And Shimano just came out with that whole line of Macbeth, which I don't technically like understand it, right? Like, they have a big crankbait, a little bit like every crankbait under the same name, but it's just interesting that everyone is pushing towards, different materials and crankbaits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something, dude. Crankbait culture, man. You want to talk about something around here? Like, that's where all of that was bred from. Balsa crankbaits and making your own balsa crankbaits came out of East Tennessee and in Southeast, America. And like, dude, it's Southeast America. That sounded really weird. Southeast United States. Southeast America would be like somewhere below Brazil. That's not what I'm talking about. But no, crankbait cultures. And the thing is, it's like, not only is it materials, but it's paint jobs too. I think that's one thing, like a lot of people, dude, there's been so many custom colors and ideas for paint jobs that have come out of this region of the country that are now on Tackle Warehouse and Bass Pro Shop shelves. But nobody realizes like that's where that color came from. You know what I mean? Like a root beer, like a splatterback root beer. Dude, I can remember that being popular, like with dudes around here and guys making custom baits long before anybody made one and sold one. You know what I mean? But yeah, I think materials are going to be interesting to see. I think I've seen dudes making crankbaits out of like foam, like hard foam and different kinds of foams and different kinds of plastics and resins. I've seen one do 3D printing them. Like, I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see where crankbaits go as far as like customization. But what's crazy is how far we've gone in one direction just to come back to the OG Slim and the Fritz side and all of these balsa baits making a resurgence. And it's kind of like what we were talking about a few minutes ago, Brandon, is like, you've seen everybody go to the chatterbait. I can promise you the spinnerbait's going to make a resurgence, and it is, especially around here. Everybody goes away from just a good old-fashioned ribbon-tail worm to every other creature bait under the sun. Well, you're going to see that resurgence coming back to just throwing a worm. Like, I love to just flip a power bait worm, like a 10-inch power bait worm, flip it instead of flipping a creature bait. You want to get your arm broke? It's something you do because, again, I don't think a whole generation of fish or 2 generations of fish have seen it. So now you're going to show them something, quote unquote, brand new, and they eat it. You know what I mean? So it's interesting.
I think custom painting too is so big. Like, you've seen so many custom colors come out, and I want to talk about custom painters out there. But before we get into that, is like, look at Bill Lewis, right? You have a color called Rayburn Red that was basically derived from a custom painter because they originally had this red shad color, right? Bill Lewis, the rattle trap, was in a red shad color. Different than their current Rayburn Red, but the Rayburn Red was derived from that red shad, right? Because a guy said, okay, everyone on Rayburn is throwing this red shad. Paint me the gold stripes on the side of it, and started smashing them. But like, you look at the influence that custom painters have had throughout basically the entire time of bass fishing, and it's just been really interesting. And like, I know Do It just came out with a new bait blast. Kind of talk through that process, right? Because that's something brand new for you guys, like a category that you guys had not been in. So talk through that, because that's a huge, huge market right now.
Yeah, it is. And it's growing, and we recognize that. So we jumped on it. It was developed by really through Component Systems, one of our sister companies. I led the development process through all the paints. So, I mean, it was literally a matter of me getting on Instagram, connecting with some like renowned painters all across America, finding guys that were willing to test out some paints and you know, weigh in and offer their feedback on what they liked, what they didn't like, what we needed to change. It was about a year-long process, and we developed about 30 colors, I want to tell you, and we've actually got 6 more in development right now that you'll see at ICAST this summer. So
That's sweet.
Yeah,
because
that
that's
was really
huge
cool
right now, right? Like, there's so many custom painters, whether it's Aaron Diddy, who like doesn't get the recognition he deserves, like insanely phenomenal in it.
Mhm.
Obviously Debo does it, but there's so many guys out there that custom paint. Zach Messer, who did Alex's crankbait colors, like, but there's this huge underground market, and I want to say underground because there's a lot of guys that people don't know that do this.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's almost like old like skater culture. Like I remember, you know, like these dudes making custom boards and doing stuff, you know, customizing skateboards, and like that whole culture, just like the underground, like motocross. I always akin bass fishing, especially YouTube bass fishing, to like freestyle motocross. Like I feel like there's so many similarities there. It's just a bunch of dudes who are out there filming themselves doing what they love. And like for years and years and years, everybody thought it was just like a big joke until everybody started to take notice of these dudes doing crazy tricks out in the desert. And then like the X Games comes along and was like, listen, I think we should do freestyle motocross in the X Games. And then all the sponsors started throwing, you know, it's the same thing that's happening to us now, which is crazy. But like, dude, the underground of painters is crazy because you can get so sneaky so quick. And like all of my crankbaits, all they are, honestly, every single color except for 2, well, really 1, but I will say 2, are old custom colors that my dad used to get painted on crankbaits. And nobody makes them, nobody paints them. And so I thought, well, we'll just bring them back. Like we'll bring back creamsicle. Like creamsicle is an old color. Dad's got 4 or 5 of them left. And they, you know, they would be put on Mimic flat sides is what he put them on. Mimics and then little Petey's. They were a few in a little Petey too. And it's just that methylate base with that like crappie white pattern and purple back. And like, that's why I brought it back. It's because it works. It catches them. It's just nobody makes that. You know, nobody even makes anything close to that.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. Go ahead, Ben.
Sorry, like you almost have to know who they are. Like you don't just, you're not just like randomly send your bait out. Like you have to kind of know the person and like be able to trust their work and find them to know who to send it to. It really is underground.
Yeah, and I think you're seeing that underground culture all the way across custom bait making has really started to surface. You know, we talked about the OG Slim. Like 5 years ago, it wouldn't have been cool for Rapala to brand that as Ott's Garage. You know what I mean? Like, in my opinion. But that's cool now. You know, it's cool to have a connection back to like the roots, really the grassroots of where all tackle comes from, which is seriously people's garages and basements. Like if you think about that, every bait ever started at somebody's house, like in their basement or garage, you know, and a lot of them truthfully, like to this day, you know, tackle companies, those owners, the people that started that first line of product from their company started with a do it mold or you know, at least had the custom tackle mentality, but more than likely had to do it mold.
Yeah, because we've had this conversation, you and I, but there's not really anyone else out there doing the lead stuff, right? Like you guys are the guys for lead product.
Yeah, we have minimal. Honestly, we have minimal competition across the entire assortment. But yeah, lead for sure.
How big has the entire tackle making market gotten for you guys over the past 2 years?
Say that one more time. You cut out. I'm sorry.
How big has that whole like tackle making market gotten for you guys over the past 2 years?
It's exploded. Demand is definitely at new heights that we cannot meet right now. So we're working diligently and smart to meet demand here. And that's going to start happening soon. And then from there, it's going to be, you know, pedal to the metal, foot on the gas, just growing the custom tackle market.
Well, like soft baits too, you guys kind of exploded and took into like a totally new level for you guys, right? Because before you guys had probably more than a handful, right? Probably like 30 soft bait molds. You guys have expanded so much into like very, very, very like really cool specific bass bait molds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We try to really cover our bases with every category and try to come up with something, either similar or very close to what's already out there. And then some originality to it too as well. But we try to cover our bases with every category. So we've got numerous options for drop shot baits because we recognize creature baits, drop shots, these are huge categories. Like you're not just going to make one drop shot mold and think, okay, here's a drop shot mold. Everybody in the world should be happy to make that one drop shot. Yeah. So we have to cover our bases. We have to have, numerous variations and models in each category. And it takes time to build that portfolio. We're cranking out about 10 new products a year right now, which is, I don't know, quite a lot, I think. Yeah. I mean, when you're making molds, that's a lot. It's a lot of work. It's a year-long process. We try to stay like a year and a half, sometimes 2 years ahead on our new product cycle. So yeah, it's just about identifying current trends, getting ahead of stuff, and then of course circling back, seeing what you're missing, keeping your eyes forward, seeing what your competition's doing, what seems to be growing, and jumping on it and staying ahead when you can.
So like when you all are developing a mold, and you don't have to get into any of the nitty gritties because I don't want it to divulge any secrets or anything, but like what's it look like?
I mean you can though. If you want to divulge secrets, you can.
Yeah, if you want to divulge secrets, that's fine. I just don't want you to get fired.
Okay.
But like when you're developing a mold, is it like, okay, I have this idea, we put it on paper, we put it in CAD, we make hell up my brain. I just had a total brain fart, a prototype. And then and then it just goes from there and there and there. And you just refine, or what's that look like?
Yeah. So full disclosure, I'm not nearly talented or smart enough to do like the actual programming, or even making the model. So I literally will sit down here and just start drawing. The process usually starts right after ICAST. So like I've already got, in a file somewhere, like 3 or 4 products identified that I needed to do, last year or this year. But then I go to ICAST and I try to save half of my other, potential models for ideas or maybe borrowing or using some elements from other baits at ICAST that I can implement on what I've already got. So from there, it's just sketching, lots and lots of drawing. I mean, when I hand over my drawings to the guy that does the actual layout of the model, it's down to the millimeter. So I mean, these are very, very specific drawings. I then give it to him. He kicks it back to me, and I've got a 3D model that I can drag around and get a really good feel for what it's actually going to look like. From there, we're cutting prototypes and then going back and shooting them. And then from there, you get your baits, typically 1 at a time. And then you go fishing and try to get it in 2, 3, sometimes 4 renditions. Of course, the fewer the better, but sometimes stuff takes time, and I don't ever let the, goal of 2 renditions getting in the way of, not offering a perfect bait.
Yeah. It's just interesting to me. And the reason it's so interesting to me is because my dad, his profession is he is a custom tool engineer for Seco Tools. So they make CNC cutting tools. He does all the custom stuff, for specific things. But now I was watching it was a video of the Do It factory, and I was like watching you guys, you were CNCing something, and it was just fascinating to me because like the future of like all these different, manufacturing types is all in CNC and then 3D printing. You know what I mean? And so it's like, it just fascinates me to see like, where do we go next? Like what's the process of making this new bait, and how, and I think like 3D printing is going to be like the next evolution of bait making, because it takes this like thing that used to be like what you say, 4 or 5 renditions of something that can end up costing quite a bit of money to something, and you're needing an immense amount of, you need a CNC machine, and you need a programmer, and you need someone to model it all out. I mean, that's not easy things to do. And it takes like these 3D printers, man. There's guys and kids that can build damn near anything they want to in their garage with it, you know, and like that's like the soul of Do It is like to build anything in your garage that you want. And I think it's going to be so cool to see going into the future, like as 3D printers and things get more and more advanced and stuff like that, you know, that, I mean, I don't know what it looks like, but hell, you know, 20 years from now, Do It could be selling 3D print like designs online. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, it's just crazy to think about, but it's going to be cool to see. It is scary, dude. I mean, it's super scary, but it's just like NFTs right now. Okay, you know, everybody's all about the NFTs. Well, all it is just digital art. Well, I mean, like it's like a 3D printer. Like I watched somebody. It was a teacher that used to work with me. She had a 3D printer, and she would just like download things off the internet and just like 3D print them, just because it was fun to do. And I was watching it one day, and I was like, I could definitely 3D print a crankbait. I could probably 3D print a badass crankbait. You know what I mean? It's just interesting to think about. Like that's one of those things. You know, Ben, me and you have talked about it before. Like, what's the future of bass fishing? And I truly believe that is a next step in bass fishing, is like being able to take an idea, put it on a computer, 3D print it, and just totally bypass the entire manufacturing process to make the thing that you want to make. You know what I mean? It's really cool.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up 3D printing and you know, making your own stuff with that. That's something I've honestly thought about just tinkering with here at home. Making, you know, glide baits, things like that would be super cool. I'm in no hurry. I don't give a shit if it takes 5 years to make the perfect one, just to make my own. And going back to, you know, resurgence of custom tackle and the culture, I guess. But you look at some of these swim bait and glide bait companies that do like limited run drops. They'll make 250 and they're sold out in 20 seconds. Like, I don't know, man. There's something to that. Those guys can perfect the stuff from their garages and basements, make a run of 20 or, you know, 200, know what they're going to make. They don't have to worry about supply chain issues. They don't have to worry about, you know, the manufacturing process. They just drop them and they sell out immediately.
But some of that too is tackle collection culture, right? There's so many guys now that just buy, like Brennan. No, there's some guys that just like buy tackle to collect it. And whether it's because they like the bait or whether they like the designer or whoever it might be, right? Like people just want cool packaged products, you know, that they can collect. And I just think that's part of it.
Yeah, there's a different appreciation for, you know, small batch custom tackle. Like, you know, I got a wall of crankbaits here, and like my balsas mean the most to me, you know, just from a collector standpoint. They all get used. I wouldn't consider myself a collector, but it would kill me to see my balsas go. You know, when I lose one, it, you know, makes me tear up.
Because you know someone put time into making that bait, right? I mean, it's like how you feel about when you make a jig, right? And now obviously it's a different level, but like specifically custom making a jig with paint color and you hand tie it, and like that jig means more to you than the $4.99 or $10.99 jig you bought at the store.
Yeah, and I think another element that probably doesn't get talked about near enough, and you know, at least to me, it's probably the most important one, aside from the money savings and stuff like that. I mean, you can absolutely blow it out of the water and, you know, make this crazy expensive, and you know, each jig could cost $5, I guess, if you wanted to make it that way.
Yeah.
Or if you weren't very resourceful, but gosh, I would think for me, just the ability to be that much more in tune with my gear, my tackle, and the confidence that gives me. Like when I'm fishing, it doesn't matter if I'm fun fishing or fishing a tournament or a Tuesday night tournament after work. Like if that's something I made myself, like a jig that I made myself, I hand tied the skirt, I selected the hook, I painted it, like I did everything to it. I just have that much more confidence in what I'm doing with it. And knowing that when I do get an opportunity, like I'm at full potential to take advantage of it.
And I think that's so huge because like every bait, it doesn't matter if it's a jig or if it's a glide bait, every bait has a learning curve. Like right out of the package, like you got to learn all the nuances of a bait. Like right now I'm experimenting with all the Berkeley jigs and I'm learning all their nuances. What do they do? How do they glide through the water? What's this look like? What's this do? And like a lot of people think a jig's a jig. And it is to an extent, but then it isn't all at the same time. Like there's jigs that have certain head designs that drop faster. There's jigs that like you could have 40 flipping jigs And I could literally line 3 up right now that are all labeled as just a flipping jig, but they are drastically different jigs, all of them, and they all drastically do different things. And I think like when you start making your own things and you can make your own refinements and you can really start to dial, like you said, dude, I mean, like when you set the hook, if the line doesn't fail or the rod doesn't fail, you have made sure that every aspect of that fish catch is, and every variable that you can control is under your control. And you now have an immense amount of confidence in what that is. You know, I tell people all the time, the reason I'm good at fishing a crankbait is because I know what every crankbait that I pick up does. I know what it's doing under the water, what it should be doing, what it should feel like, what it shouldn't feel like, what happens. I mean, dude, I've spent thousands of hours with a crankbait in my hand, so I know what it needs to do. And I tell people all the time, like, that's gaining confidence in anything. That's when you gain full confidence in a bait, is when you know exactly what it's supposed to do. And I think making your own stuff, man, it's like, here's knowing that, and then here's just that next level of constantly, and it's just control. It's like it's a variable that you can control.
Well, like Brennan might cringe when I say this, but making your own baits isn't something that's great when you're a brand new fisherman, right? Like making and getting a do-it mold isn't the best thing to do when you're like brand new, unless you just want to go out and fish stock, whatever. But like my Sparky head is not necessarily meant to, well, it's definitely not meant to have a bait keeper on it. Like it's not a great bait to have a jig skirt tied on. Like there's things that I do to it or I have modified, and it takes a special hook because that jig is perfect for exactly what I want it to do. But like when I got that mold, when I was like relatively new to fishing, I would take the recommended hook, which I think is like a 2/0 or 3/0 hook, which is tiny, and put it in a 1/2 ounce jig because it's not meant to be a bass jig, but the head was right and everything was right. But knowing what I know now about jig fishing, I can make that thing almost perfect. And Brennan does the same thing with the swim jig. Like Brennan and I have gone back and forth about the hook that he's using on the swim jig and about, you know, the way that his swim jig is set up and the skirt he ties on it. Like there's so many special things you can do to make a bait like perfect for you or your situation.
Absolutely. Like, you know, just touching on swim jigs here real quick. Like I have swim jigs for long casts covering water, just fan casting, you know, whether it's a grass flat or a sand point, whatever it might be. I've got a specific hook that I'll put in my swim jigs for that, for making bomber casts and just covering water. When I switch to making short pitches and heavy cover, I want a heavier hook. So, I mean, I can select my hook for different situations. And then, of course, like matching forages and getting really specific with your colors is a whole nother thing. But just the versatility that you have in selecting your own hooks and how that can play, that's huge. I mean, there's a lot of situations where like you go to the store or you're ordering online and you don't know what hook necessarily is in there. And a lot of times, a lot of people will select a hook that's just way too heavy, and they, you know, it's a football jig with a 2X hook, and they bomb it out there. They get a bite at the end of their cast, and they're just dropping fish after fish, and they have no idea. Like, dude, your hook's like, you know, one size too large at least in terms of wire diameter, and you're never going to get a hook in that fish.
It's like all those jigs that Ben had that I've been all the hooks out on flipping because they were sucky hooks that couldn't withstand. I don't even know, but like for real, like no, like when I flip,
but they don't flip. Like you and I flip different. You were fishing it on fluorocarbon, which you never really used, and for me, like I don't set the hook like a monster. Like I just set the hook to set the hook into a bass. Alex sets a hook into it like to break them.
I try to murder them. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like I want them to yeah, exactly. Like I want them to regret every life decision up to that point. Is what I want them to do. But no, I mean, like I know when I flip a jig, it has to have a certain kind of hook in that jig. All right, when I flip a creature bait, I have to have a certain kind of hook just because of my fishing style. Like I fish when I hit them hard. I fish hard. Even when I don't hit them hard, I'm still 6'4" and weigh 230 pounds. I mean, like, dude, I'm just going to naturally crack them a little bit harder than everybody else does. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I think jigs, talking about jigs like, and especially like dragging a jig, I think that's very interesting. I think so many people overlook the importance of a jig hook. And there's so many companies out there that just like throw generic XYZ hook into the jig. You know what I mean? Like there's no thought process behind like, oh, this might be good because this part, like you said, is going to bomb this on a cast and drag it around. And like I remember, and this was me just being a guy who doesn't throw a Carolina rig. I was throwing like it was like a, I don't know, it was a 4/0 EWG, you know, like just your standard like 2X hook. You know what I mean? Like what I would normally flip with,
like a flipping hook, yeah,
flipping hook. And so I kept missing so many fish. And when I switched up to just it was a EWG hook, it was just a light wire hook, I started putting fish into the boat. And it's like that learning process of, oh, this makes sense because this is more like a hypodermic needle. So when I'm way out there, it doesn't take as much pressure to just that thing right in there. Whereas when I'm fishing with 6 foot of line out and I crack their ass as hard as I possibly can, I am forcing that big hook so far up in their head that it's not going to come out. I think so many people, and that's like that swim jig you made me, Ben.
Yeah.
Dude, that thing is deadly. And it's because of that little hook, man. Like you can be reeling that thing along and one come up behind it and overtake it. And it doesn't take a whole lot of force to just pop that hook right in there, which I think is so, so huge.
Yeah, man, it's just so interesting how in depth you can get to like understand every little component. And I think that's going to be the biggest learning curve. Like when I get a bunch of Berkeley jigs and I'm going to start to learn them, it's going to be like learning them because I know there's got to be a difference between their flipping jig hook and their casting jig hook and their skipping hook. Like there are differences, and you can't just, unfortunately, you can't just grab a random jig and trust that it's going to do exactly what you need, because there's going to be a jig that I like versus, you know, you or someone else.
Yeah. So for example, like this is a jig that I tie. This is like a example of a short pitching swim jig, you know, close combat jig that I'm going to throw in heavy cover. It's got a super, super strong owner hook in there. It could pull a truck out of a ditch probably. And then this is another one that I tie for, you know, covering grass flats, things like that. Really long cast with, you know, 12 to 17 pound fluoro, where this a lot of times is going to be thrown on 30-pound braid. Totally different hook. And to a lot of people, you know, a lot of people I think can make the distinction and know, you know, which is which, but making your own tackle, you just have that much deeper understanding for what's at play and how to adjust. And then, you know, obviously having the ability to control that is huge. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the head on your shorter pitching like swim jig. That I like that wider kind of the bottom on there. Yeah. That dude, that's huge. And I love that because I know for me, I like to fish a lighter swim jig and I like it to glide. Like I'll fish it almost like throw it up on the bank, you know, in inches of water and just drag it off like you would drag your standard like flipping jig, because it comes up and it like levels and glides and levels and glides, and then I can start reeling it and I get a lot of bites that way. And so that's interesting. That's a really cool jig.
Yeah, here's
Brandon, he's gonna look. He's pulling everything out here on us. That's what I'm talking about.
That's a 1/4 ounce head. That's a 4.8 inch swim bait, but that's a 1/4 ounce head. It's that same light wire O'Shaughnessy hook I was telling you about. Yeah. So I mean, I can bomb this up in 6 inches of water with that giant swim bait that's, you know, carrying a lot of drag. It keeps it up in the water column. I can control it anywhere that I want. It's got a super good hook. I can bomb that thing out there and get a hook in it every time. Yeah, that's important.
That's awesome. So you're a swim jig man, huh? I'm gonna have to come fishing.
I'm a jig guy.
I'm gonna have to come fishing with you and learn the swim jig a little bit better. I've been learning it in my own weird way. You know what I mean? Which is very Alex Ruddy, and I'm sure it doesn't apply everywhere, but it's what I do. But I it's like something I've just never had a ton of confidence in. Is like swimming a jig. It's like because it's not doing anything. Like it's not vibrating or pulling back. Like it's like, well, it's not in my mind. I know it is, but in my mind, I'm like, well, this damn thing ain't doing nothing. Like I ain't catching no fish on this. You know what I mean? But it's like, I know if you can get it through your head, like, hey, this thing is doing what it needs to do, you can go crack them on it. And I'm looking forward to this year. There's a few lakes around here that apparently the swim jig bite in the spring is silly. And so I'm very looking forward to like going there and just locking it in my hand for a day and going, okay, let me go see what happens. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So my home water, we were talking about it before I jumped on here. Home home water for me was the Mississippi River. So that's kind of where I learned the swim jig. You kind of have to at the Mississippi River. It's I believe where the swim jig actually originated from, like no joke, is the Mississippi River. Especially the upper Mississippi pools here by me. Such a powerful tool. You can cover so much water. It's such an effective way to fish around cover. But like you said, there's a learning curve there, and you just have to like build, like anything, you got to build confidence before you're good at it. But the swim jig, like you're throwing something out there and just floating it to the boat. And like, if you're not getting bites, it can make you feel pretty stupid quick and make you want to set it down. So I totally get it.
Yeah. Well, that was me. It's why I almost had to turn it into a flipping bait for myself. It was like, I would flip it in there and then I would like treat it like a flipping jig until that last 2/3 of the cast. And then I would reel it and do like so many times, flip it in there, you know, pulse, and then start to reel it in. As soon as I started to reel it, they crack it. And it's like, that's how I taught myself to fish a swim jig, which I know is just totally probably counterintuitive to how it should be fished. But it was like, that's what gave me enough confidence in it to like actually lock it in my hand and go do it. But it is pretty fascinating. Like, there's a few lakes around here, very pressured lakes, you know, not super giant fish in them, but you can go catch some fish. It's like, I've gone and skipped a swim jig around docks. And is there something about just that passive do nothing? It's just like you said, floating. It's literally just floating and hanging in their face, and they will come freaking unglued on it because everybody else is throwing a chatterbait or flipping or doing something that's just much more intrusive than, you know, a 3/8, 3/16 ounce swim jig is.
Yeah, and it's like a jerk bait in the sense that you got to know where those fish are positioned in the column. I mean, if you're throwing it underneath of them and the bait's coming up underneath of them, it's not going to do the same thing as if it were, you know, just above their head. But it's a dual, maybe triple purpose bait. And not to give away, you know, a new product, you'll have to wait till I cast. But we are doing something right now that's going to probably cater kind of what you were talking about, and that's, you know, treating it as a flipping bait. So maybe you flip it out there and it comes through cover really well. When it hits bottom, it does kind of position up a little bit like an Arky or a Sparky, but then it comes through cover so you can wind it back in just as good and fish it back to the boat through cover. So kind of a dual purpose swim jig. So keep an eye out for that. I
will. I'm very interested. You've piqued my interest. I'll have to come visit your booth at ICAST.
Yeah, come on in. Come on in.
Are you going to the Classic?
No, I'm not. I wish I was. Next year, I'm definitely going, though. Never been. So.
Hey, come on. You'll be in Knoxville. You can come on.
I know,
come
dude.
On, stay at the house. We're going to party, dude.
All right. Sign me up.
So what's next? Like, what techniques are next for you guys, especially this year? Like, are there certain techniques you have in mind that you want to try or learn or you think might make a resurgence? Like, what's coming up for everyone, both of you?
Just in terms of like personal stuff that I want to work on as an angler?
Yeah, that, and then we'll kind of dive into bait-wise, right? Like where we see the market or industry going.
Yeah, I always try to select, like just me personally, I always try to pick like 2 or 3 things that maybe aren't new to me, but 2 to 3 things that I know I could work on and you know, dive deeper into and dissect and get better at. One of them we talked about earlier, and that's a spinnerbait. I think I'm starting to unlock stuff, starting to, you know, tear stuff apart and get better at it every year. But there's a couple things that I'm going to try differently with it this year in a couple new scenarios. And then another one that we're, you know, freshly off the subject of, and that's a swim jig in deep, deep water. I'm talking like, you know, 10 to 20 foot, let's say 15 to 20 foot, really deep open water stuff. You're seeing a lot of stuff out of Texas right now. If you pay any attention to some of the stuff that's going on down there, swim jigs and 15-pound bass in like 15 foot of water. Not that I have 15-pound bass here in Iowa, but we're going to apply that same, you know, same concept.
Does he take the weed guard out of it, or does he leave it in, or like what does that look like? Is it just a swim jig?
I don't know. I don't know that it really gets talked about in detail yet. I mean, I keep a really close eye on it. Josh Jones is the person that I'm talking about. I had the opportunity to go out to eat with Josh Jones's crappie tournament partner that, you know, they won all this money on fishing the crappie masters circuit, taking everybody's money with live scope. So I got to pick his brain a little bit at ICAST when we were out to eat about some things, but the dude's just lighting it up. And a lot of the success is on A-rigs. A lot of the success is on a swim jig. and all season
it's
too.
something, man, like no one does, right? Like no one's taking a swim jig, or really many jigs at all for that matter, and targeting those live scope fish, because that's a lot of what it is. Like, hate to say that, but it's a lot of live scope fish, and they see all these things. They see a rig, they see a jerk bait, they see the little swim bait, and that's why I think the spin head is going to be a bigger player on a rig or on a live scope fish. But like the swim jig, no one does.
You know, I was fascinated by live scope today. It was Keith Poche was in like 6 foot of water, live scoping a bush that he couldn't see under the water, and was catching fish out of it on live scope in like 6 foot of water. And like everybody, you know, like I forgot who said something about it, but it was like, you know, everybody's talking about targeting suspended fish and fish that are offshore. And here's Keith Poche right up on the bank doing something that he knows how to do, which is flip a bush. But he's using live scope because he flipped in there and he watched one follow his bait out. And so he flipped back in there and like started really working through that slow and started getting the bites. And that was like when live scope for me just became so much more immensely interesting than it was before, because I was like, oh, I wonder how many times I've drug a creature hog away from a bass under a dock that if I had live scope and watched him swim out, I could pitch back in there and catch him. I was like, huh, that's interesting.
Go ahead, Ben.
No, take it.
Oh, I was just going to say my last bait, I guess, that I'm interested in working on this year. And this one's totally foreign to me, and it plays right into what you were just saying with forward-facing sonar. I got active target this year, so just like the fundamentals are there, I think. But really honing in on those details with specific baits and specific situations is something I'm going to really focus on this year. So spinnerbait, swim jig with forward-facing sonar is something I'm going to really focus in on. And then lastly would be a giant hair jig, like 5/8, 1 ounce head, 9 to 12 inch feathers coming off. Like I'm gonna build up some badass hair jigs and feed them to some bass, or try.
That'd be sweet. Like
with forward-facing sonar.
You saw that kind of come out a couple of years ago when they're doing the ledge stuff, but you've not heard anyone really talk about it with the forward-facing sonar.
I heard some stuff from Milliken, and I won't say anything more about this, but I heard some stuff from Milliken, words from his mouth about it that intrigued me. So that's all I'll say. But
that's sweet.
I think what's so interesting about that is that like it is created, forward-facing sonar has created a bunch of Caleb Bells. And Brandon, I don't think you know Caleb, but he's a good buddy of me and Ben's, and he lives down on Chickamauga.
Okay.
And what it's done is dude, let me tell you something about him. You think of the stupidest thing that you could rig up, and he will rig it up and go fishing with it and catch them. Like a 1 ounce hair jig in 6.5 foot of water, reeling it as fast as he can over a grass flat. And he's like, he'll call you like, I caught 32 pounds. You know, my biggest one was a 9 pounder. And I was like, what were you doing? He was like, I was reeling a 1 ounce swim jig over a grass flat as fast as I could reel it. Well, it's like that. The same thing has happened with forward facing sonar. It's because it was like, first it was like, okay, first we target all these fish and they'll eat a jerkbait. Like all of them will eat a jerkbait. Okay, well, they quit eating the jerkbait. Well, then it was an Alabama rig. Okay, well, they quit eating Alabama. Next is the swim jig. Okay, they quit eating the swim jig. And next it's going to be like, okay, now we're, like you say, a hair jig or whatever it is. Like it just, you start experimenting and the experimentation just goes completely wacky. But damn, if you're catching 9 pounders, nothing's too wacky. You know what I mean?
Innovation, though. Yeah.
But you're getting guys that start to become experts in it, or like really, really good. And it's not as easy as like having it on your boat and just go do it. And I think that's the biggest misconception, right? Because if I put my live scope on Alex's boat, it would take him a while, or maybe he would never become an expert in it because it doesn't fit his style of fishing. But like guys are becoming very, very, very good. Look at Patrick Walters, look at Milliken, Josh Jones. I think I'm pretty decent with it. Like there are guys that are very, very good with forward-facing sonar. But I think it's actually making it, it's opening up the bank for the guys like Alex and guys that are really good in shallow water.
Well, what I'll do is I'll take it and do what, just like I did with the swim jig. I'll do my own thing. It'll probably be wrong in the mainstream of how you're supposed to do it. I think that's the biggest thing for me. Is like I am so counter to what everybody else is doing. Like if they're out there, and I don't want to be in 25 foot of water with an A-rig throwing at fish that are suspended in 15 foot over a brush pile. That bores the absolute shit out of me. Like, yeah, that's cool. I can go catch fish, whatever. I hate that crap. I want to be up in a river somewhere in current trying to catch them. But the thing is if I can take that active target or the live scope or any of the variations of it, and I can figure out how to target river fish that are suspended over grass and, do something like that in the current and go target the fish that I want to target, well, then it becomes something very, very cool to me and then becomes a tool that I want to use. And I think that's the biggest thing for me with a lot of techniques. And and that's what makes bass fishing so anecdotal. Everybody, it's a sum of your experiences. That's all fishing is. And so for me, like, that's what would make it cool for me. And so that's what I need for it to be cool for me. It's not cool right now because I only see it as the guy who's out there in 25 foot, like what Ben does. Like, dude, it's fun. That day we went to that lake and chased those fish. I had a ton of fun because we were catching fish. But like, would I ever go do that on my own? Absolutely not. I'm going to go skip docks and crack their heads in every single time. Yeah. But then when I watch Keith Poche scan that brush pile today using that perspective mode, and he watched that fish swim out, and I heard him say, "Oh, there comes that fish again," and he stopped that shaky head and just barely pulled it. It goes donk. I was like, oh, that crap's cool right there. Like, I can get down on that. That's something completely different.
Yeah. So what about you, Alex? Like, what do you see as being like new or exciting in your world? Other baits you want to learn or pick up, or things like, what's trendy for you?
That's a good question. I definitely jig. I got on a jig bite at the end of the year last year and started really realizing the power of a jig. And I think so many people have quit throwing jigs or don't flip jigs and don't really execute on a jig other than to drag it like a football head jig around here. And so, like, I want to really experiment with a power bait jig, that power bait skirted jig. And that's another thing, like scent technology, period. Last year opened my eyes to scent technology and how good that crap actually is. You know what I mean? And so I really want to dive more into learning all the nuances of when it's applicable, how to use it, what situations there and all that kind of stuff. And then, man, other than that, just really kind of breaking out of the mold, like breaking out of my own routine, because I get very routine. Like, I get very, and it's because I don't have a ton of time. And when I don't have a ton of time, which going into this next year, it's looking like I'm going to have a lot more time, I'll actually have time to go experiment and explore new bodies of water and not just go back to my routine of the same thing over and over and over again. Because, like, I've gone and figured out 2 or 3 rivers around me, and I can guarantee you that I can go there and get at least 3 or 4 or 5 bites and have a subpar decent day, if not having an excellent day when it all comes together. But what I want to do is I want to press myself, and I want to drive to, like, I found like 4 or 5 lakes. I've got them all marked on my map, like 2 hours away, same distance away as Chickamauga is from me, but they're tiny little mountain lakes in another state. I want to drive there. I want to put my boat in, and I want to go just figure that out. So that's really what I want to do. I want to take what I already know, but I want to go to other places and figure the fish out there more than anything. But other than baits, man, I'm so daggone utilitarian, man. You know me, like, there's like 5 or 6 things I like to throw, and that's what I throw. And I experiment more with baits within the categories that I like than experimenting with different categories of baits. But the drop shot thing, the power shot, flipping a drop shot on 17-pound test, I'm going to do that. That interests me. I think I can crack their ass on that. So I want to go try that.
Heck yeah.
I think this new, like, bait fish shaped lure thing is going to be a big deal this year and like in the next coming years, because obviously you have the Berkeley Gilly, you have the Javelin Gillmaster, I don't know, like these bait fish, the depths,
bull slide. Yeah,
you have the bait fish shaped lures that work on a free rig or even have independent natural swimming motions. But like, I'm kind of curious to see what happens in the next couple of years. Like, what shapes are going to be coming next, or kind of what is the progression of bait shapes? Exactly. Yes, those baits. Like, is that the progression of shapes, do you think, or where What's in Japan that's coming over? What do you see?
And is this a question for me?
Kind of in general.
Okay. I think in general, Japan is always 3, 4, 5 years ahead of us. Maybe not ahead of us, like they're smarter than us, whatever. I think they're naturally in their environment, they have to find ways to get bites, like find ways faster than us because they have more pressure over there in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
I think it takes 3, 4, or 5 years a lot of times for those ideas to kind of hit ground here, a company or two to put a bait out there and to see a surge in sales, and then other companies, pile on. I just think that cycle takes like about 4 or 5 years. I think one of them is, like you mentioned, these bait fish profile, just everything, creature baits, even the G-Crack bellows gill, which there's people that are pissed that I just said that.
But that's a really, really good bait. Like, has supernatural movement because.
Oh my God. Yeah. You can swim it. You can treat it like a jig. You can stroke it off the bottom. You can drag it. It's incredible. I've had a lot of success on it here just in Iowa. So just things like that. And then I also think finesse. I mean, Japan is constantly cranking out like smaller and smaller and smaller baits, and it's cooler and cooler and cooler to buy them and have them. Maybe not to me, but to a lot of people. So I don't think, finesse is never going to go away, period. There's always going to be a time and place for it. I think they're going to find ways, and they already are, to offer a finesse profile and offer a finesse presence in the water with some action, not just like a TRD or stick bait or something, a do nothing bait, but a bait that actually does something, but is small.
Have you seen the OSP? I think it's a OSP Mylar minnow, maybe. It's a tiny, like they have them bigger, but it's like a tiny 3-inch minnow shape, but it has a hollow section. And so when you rig it on a hover shot or whatever, like essentially a very, very lightweight jig head, it will cause it to have a natural rolling action.
Does it have a segment in between with some mesh?
Yes.
Is that a jackal bounty minnow or something like that?
Maybe that's that's a jackal bounty fish, but this is like a really small profile bait, and it just has a hollow section, and it causes the bait to roll. Jackal has like the revolt fry, I think it is, but essentially like there's this group of finesse bait fish style plastics that are meant for really light or basically weightless style presentations to fish super shallow. Or you can put it on a medium sized jig head, like up to a 1/4 ounce is like the biggest you want to go, and it will cause it to roll. And you essentially, like what I do with the live scope, just barely turn the handle so it hovers through the middle of the water column perfectly vertical or perfectly horizontal. But I'm really intrigued by like this whole fascination of super finesse, like very lightweight presentations.
Yeah, absolutely. Just like the other day on Instagram, I was scrolling through and some dude posted like a picture of a chatterbait like this big, and I looked into it. I don't remember the name of the company or anything, but I mean, like they're actually making them, and it's something I would use for like perch or bluegill around here. But they're targeting large.
I got some jackal brake blades out in the beard barn that are like, I got one that's 3/16 of an ounce, and I've got another one that's, so I want to say 1/16 of an ounce. And they're just tiny, like 2/0 hooks, and they're made to be fished on spinning rods. And it's fascinating. Like it's a Japanese deal, it's that finesse. It's like you say, it's a finesse presentation, but it's got that action, and it's just a completely different action. And I've played around with some of them small ones on a spinning rod, dude. And I mean, they are just, it's super fast, super erratic, something completely different. And I think you can show those fish something. And I'll tell you, Ben, to go back to something that I do want to try this year is that Agent E. I want to lock that thing in my hand and figure that bait out. The dark sleeper never appealed to me. The reason the dark sleeper never appealed to me was because I watched you lose a couple giants on it. And like I knew of people losing giants on it. And I thought I'm not going to even deal with it.
I just never really understood how to fish it, right? So I'm taking that bait and I'm fishing it on a medium spinning rod because I think I fish it like a tube, right? Because it has a really small hook and small hook gap.
It's stout though.
it's a very stout hook,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I never really understood how to fish it, and so I wasn't getting good hook set on these fish, and I was just mad, right? But like, there's like an opportunity there where I think that's a new category of bait. That Edwin said it. Edwin said it best. He's like, that is a new category of bait that, yes. Did they have the dark sleeper? Yes. Do we have the Agent E? Yes. But there's a new category of baits that's going to come around that, where you have like an internal weighted jig head that's going to have a similar action. That's going to be a new category.
And just the fact that that small of a package is 1/2 ounce, and I can take that thing and flip it and treat it like a jig and show those fish a jig presentation with a profile that they may have never seen before. I feel like that is a thing where I can literally go crack fish for a long time, because everybody else is flipping a creature bait or a jig or whatever, and I can take an Agent E and flip it up there and treat it exactly the same way, show them the same exact presentation, but it's a different profile. And dude, is like, as big as these fish are around me on being bluegill eaters in the river and being shad eaters in the lake, like, dude, shad spawn, that may be the thing that you pick up when the shad stop spawning and all of them get a little bit deeper. Like, it's the thing is, like, we crack them in the morning, but then once, the sun gets up, like, what do? We're sitting there, we're like, got our thumbs up our butts because we can't figure out the bite after that. You take a little Agent E and flip it out there and treat it just like a jig, dude, you may be able to crack it. I don't know. Like, that's just a situation that I'm kicking around in my head with that bait that I find very interesting. And when Edwin told me, Edwin was like, fish it like a jig. And I was like, oh, I thought it was a swim bait. He's like, no. He's like, fish it like a jig. And I was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I get it now. Like,
I fish a dark sleeper a lot. It's a bait that I've been playing with for like the last 3 years. But within like the last 1.5, 2 years, I've got a lot of confidence in it. Fishing it, like you said, in jig scenarios. So like, for example, like some of these lakes around here that I fish like Tuesday night little tournaments in after work, like might have 40 boats on a tiny lake. So we just play musical chairs on brush piles, on man-made brush piles around the lake. So I go behind everybody with a dark sleeper, 3/8 to 1/2 ounce, and crawl it through wood piles that, a jig, a 7-inch power bait worm, a Texas rig sweet beaver have already been drugged through. And then here comes me with the dark sleeper and pop, I'm catching them behind people. It's a great bait. And it is a new technique. I really think so.
Yeah. It's fascinating too. I just love the size to weight ratio. Because I think way too many, I have fell victim to this. It's throwing too big of a bait. My fish specifically love small profile baits. They are, I don't know if it's just because they're so pressured or if it's just that's the opportunity that they find the best or what it is. But like, I used to be the dude to like, and it was because it worked. We would throw a full size brush hog. Like, and that was like what you flipped because that's what they ate. Well, as years and pressure has gone by, now like we're going in there with, like tiny little baits, like, even like the creature hog. Like I'll cut down a creature hog sometimes just to give it a little bit shorter profile, fishing a 3/0 straight shank hook instead of a 4/0, just something so I can fish smaller. And that Agent E and the dark sleeper, I guess too, because I never really played with it as much. Like you're talking about a 2.5-inch bait that's 1/2 ounce. Like it's little, like it's that long. And like, which on here that you can't tell how long that is. It's longer than my peener. But anyway, no, but like just that small size, dude, like that in that 1/2 ounce pack. I don't know that, man. I just see that freaking thing. Like I'm probably gonna crack some heads with it, and it's also got a big old hook in it, which that means I can just slam their ass, and I don't have to worry about something falling apart on me. But yeah, dude, I'm excited, man. I'm super excited.
I think you will see a category kind of evolve around those two baits in specific. I think you're going to start to see more of those for sure.
Mm-hmm. What rod and reel are you fishing that on? That's something I'm trying to kind of figure out right now.
I'll fish it on a medium heavy casting rod sometimes, just like I would a jig. I have a medium heavy spinning rod that I use for like heavier tubes and stuff too. I'll drag it with that. But because it is a stouter hook, and a lot of times I am making, maybe not super long, but like a moderate cast in some cases, I will fish it all the way up to like 17-pound fluoro.
Gotcha.
It's definitely a stout enough hook that you don't want to be fishing too light a line. especially
That
if
was
you're
my
fishing in
thing. I'm
cover.
fishing it on like a spinning rod, like a 7-foot, maybe medium light spinning rod. I just like,
Yeah, tough to get a hook in
I
them.
got so mad, because I didn't know. There was nothing out there that told me how to fish that thing, right? Like you have to really lock it in your hand and learn it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a stout little hook. It's a great hook, but you definitely got to have the right line ready to go for it.
So kind of wind this thing down. Like, what are the next couple months looking like for you, Brennan, and kind of like where is Do It going to be in the next couple months, right? Like you guys have some product releases at ICAST. So what's kind of your plans?
Well, so there's 2 products that you should keep your eye out for. Released the first day of the Classic. So we have 1 mold coming out that will be released first day of the Classic, and then some new powder paints. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. And then after that, it's just ICAST. So from here, we've got most of our products yet. We got to wrap up. Several of them are really close, like final stages. Doing some testing, things like that, just finalizing design, stuff like that we're going to start production. Photography on the water, the fun stuff, the really fun stuff. Like you get to build the stuff, which is cool, but now you get to go catch fish with the stuff, which is even cooler, and take pictures and videos. So that's coming here. As soon as this damn ice is off the lakes, we'll be starting that. And then after that, we get to release the stuff, which is a great time as well at ICAST.
And how is what are sales looking like for you guys right now? What is inventory looking like? And kind of where do you see that going?
I mean, honestly, inventory is a little bleak, but I guess that's a good problem to have right now. We're working hard and fast to get caught up, but we're making some shifts that are going to, start to take place here pretty soon. This spring, this summer, that's going to allow us to meet demand and then some. So it's going to be a couple exciting years that do it, the process, but I think it's going to be a couple exciting years here. And I think you're going to see a new Do It, really. I do.
That's exciting.
A cooler Do It.
Yeah?
A cooler Do It. That's right.
Are you guys moving towards more bass stuff? I mean, you guys have a lot of bass stuff, but what is your product mix looking like?
Yeah, a lot of bass. A lot of our, I would say, like our nitty gritty, like most hardcore customers are tournament bass guys, probably. We have a really unique customer base. I mean, we've got guys that are making 1 ounce, 2 ounce, 5 ounce bank sinkers for catfishing on below the Kentucky River Dam or something. But then we've also got tournament bass guys, so like polar opposite customer base in a lot of ways. But for those tournament bass guys, like one of the most sought after and things, coolest things that they like to do and build is jigs. I think you're going to see us, kind of circle back to this, like circling back on some older products, some older categories, and revamping some stuff, modernizing it. The Sparky jig's awesome. The Arky jig's awesome, but there's some more modern twists to those things in specific. And I think we're going to circle back on those and maybe make some adjustments. Not that there's not a time and place for stuff like that, because there certainly is, but we can make a better mousetrap now, so we're going to do it.
That's awesome. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you hopping on with me and chatting bass fishing. Alex, thanks, buddy, I guess. No, but thank you all for listening. Tonight's been a lot of fun. As always, hit that thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening over on Spotify or any of the other streaming platforms, hope you guys enjoy and listen some more, and hit subscribe on there too. But as always, thank you guys for listening, watching. Take care, tight lines. God bless. Pursue your passion.
Bye.